So before we get to Cedar Rapids, I just wanted to let you all know that I did hold a live fundraiser on my channel on this previous Tuesday. And I have a lot of people telling me that they're not getting any notifications for my lives, and sometimes for my weekly videos like this one as well. So I want to remind you all to hit that bell notification button again. You may have hit it before, and I think YouTube has a knack for disabling that, and you have to go back in and do that, and that way you won't miss these opportunities. So the fundraiser all had to do with a request for support, financial support for my channel. Things are getting a little bit tighter around the household here as the children get older and the demands are a little bit higher, and I would like to keep making videos for you. So if any way you can support the channel financially, I would certainly appreciate it. I don't ask for much. I'm not monetized, and certainly not a requirement. I'm not going to make a members group. Everything will be available for everyone. PayPal is the best option to do that. You could also buy me a coffee, and of course I have all my books. If you haven't purchased my books, that's another way to support the channel. And I always appreciate you watching my videos, and thanks for being here. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the small city of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And as I like to do, we'll begin with the population demographics. We've got about 140,000 modern day, turning the clocks back to the turn of the century. We're looking at 25,000 people in the census. Most of the structures you're going to see were built between about 1870 and 1830. So you can see the population size, not overly large. And we like to make the comparison with the architecture we're going to be looking at. And I do enjoy looking at the American Midwest, perhaps a little too much, some have said. We'll see quite a few postcards just to get a feel for the streets. And of course, right away we're seeing the rail car narrative being a huge part of the infrastructure, the wide streets, ornate, elaborately decorated brick buildings with all sorts of interesting fronts, if you will. And I did my best to dig up some timelines on a lot of these structures. This is the Allison Hotel. We're told it was built after the Clifton Hotel burned down in 1903. Of course, it was fireproof, the one that they built. Now, if you're not familiar with the channel, I don't really believe that a lot of the historical narrative were given for these structures. I think there's a deception in the timeline that we've been given about history. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. A lot of those reasons have to do with how short the build timeline is for many of these, and how clustered together many of them are as well, especially in these small locations when you have to factor in how many people would have actually been available to do the work. Here you can see the windows in the lower levels on this hotel. So all sorts of indications that something is wrong with the timeline. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time. There could be buildings that were legit and built at the timeline that they're telling us, but I'm just saying I don't really believe these storylines, because if you find one inaccuracy, one thing that appears to be a lie, how can you assume that all the rest is truth, right? I think you have to go the opposite way. And if you don't see a build start date on these, it's likely because I wasn't able to find one. But you get all sorts of interesting structures like this, which was built to be the auditorium in Cedar Rapids. Very curious timeline here on the construction process. They actually just chose the site to build it upon in March of 1899, we're being told. And then after much deliberation about design, it gets built and then dedicated in May of 1900. So that's not just build time, that is where they chose to build it, and they still needed time to decide the design before they were able to do all this. And we're talking about a 4,000 seat capacity auditorium that was built in clearly in less than a year. There's no way that all of the decision making was done overnight. And they do give us a couple alternate designs. Apparently this maybe is the one that they went with, or close to, and we get another drawing of this one as well. And I often wonder, were these buildings also up, and is there a bit of a deception going on there with the drawings? I don't know, but all of it I think is fairly suspicious. And we jump to the modern day, and this would be their auditorium in the modern day. Even this one looks like it's got remnants of an old facade that has been boxed out and minimized. This is apparently the new auditorium, or the current auditorium in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I do like to hit on these small town locations, small city locations, if you will, because I do think it helps to illustrate the absurdity of the historical narrative we're given. Whereas you may be able to explain things away logically in your mind, looking at these larger cities, throwing massive population numbers at you and resources. These smaller cities wouldn't have had those resources available. And you have to remember, when you're looking at population, like I said, about 25,000 people living in Cedar Rapids at the time. At least half of those would be children, likely, according to our perception of the time, and we are told that families had large amounts of children back then. I don't know if you can lean on any of that really either, but also half of them would be women, so wouldn't likely be in the building trades workforce. So you're whittling that potential for this type of construction down to a really almost a select few, especially when you factor in all the other industries going on, the railways, and this city was packed with mills of all sorts, and of course the designation for each building as well. I don't know what this one is. I couldn't find this structure here. Interesting. There's the auditorium in the background there. So just a couple street scenes. So really what I'm trying to say is the bottom seems to fall out of a lot of these is when you look a little bit deeper into the narrative. And no different here in Cedar Rapids. I haven't really looked at one city that says to me, okay, no, this is looks to be on the up and up, and there's no evidence really of this old world architecture. And when I say old world architecture, I'm talking about this type of styling here, and we've always been taught to know it as Victorian styling, and I think that's a cover story for the victors over the old world, the new world victors, and I do think there's an aspect of energy harnessing of the ether attached to the old world infrastructure that has been obscured from our perception of reality. It has been fictionalized. Of course, you get some of these interesting almost advertisement postcards as well from that time. Like, there's plenty of room, almost indicating maybe an empty city. Let's fill it up. I don't know. So this is the Federal Post Office. I had some contradictory information on this one. We'll see it a bit later as well. If I looked that one up, it tells me it was completed in 1908. I also saw that it was built in the 1890s. So it's a little bit confusing as far as that goes. This is the old cereal mill, massive structure, massive multi-storied structure for an early time period. This you can see copyrighted in 1907. You can actually almost get a sense of the detailing going on here on the brick and the massive smokestack. Of course, we will never be able to take a look at that because this cereal mill burned down in 1905, we were told. Absolute catastrophic devastation going on here. You can see another photograph with the one wall still standing, ready to come down. And that is also giving you an indication of how well built and ornate this thing is. But it's gone. And it's not the only case of a mill fire in Cedar Rapids, as we'll see moving forward. Alright, the Coe College campus has some interesting structures. Here's the chapel. I'll move through it a little bit quickly, this one, just to get it all in. Not a large file, but the city waterworks is not the only city waterworks. There's another one you'll see at the end as well, but I could really find no information on that. Going back now to the Cove College, we have a massive brick structure, arch windows, basement, taking those boxes, those old world boxes. Another look at the Cove College, the men's dormitory there. So some interesting structures there, and I suspect a lot has been removed, changed, demolished. I really have a suspicion that what I'm able to even find, or what we're able to find even online, is a fraction of what was actually in these locations. And I will say there is a heavy influence, appears to be, of these gentlemen's clubs in Cedar Rapids, which again, to me, puts up the red flag that there was a coordinated effort to roll out society in a specific manner. A lot of people know if you join these organizations, it's likely a ticket to financial success. If you don't, the path becomes a lot more difficult. That was always the selling point of all of that. So, food for thought, anyway. This is strange too, because they're calling this the post office block. And we will see another post office as well. So the one that we saw earlier is supposedly the federal post office. This one I'm not sure, but I thought I would include it. And there we have the what was used as the city hall for a while on the island, in between, on either side of the river. Interesting, this whole setup here. Find it very interesting. We'll take a look at that building briefly a little bit later. Apparently it flooded and they moved the city hall location, but it was used as the city hall for a while. Also giving me the feel of that factory feel. You can see the stack here as well. Wonder how artificial the landmass itself is. Things to consider. So there's that shrine again. Very strange. You do see these in certain locations in the States. Shriners using this El Kahir shrine. And I have a few visuals of these gents doing their thing. All sorts of strangeness there. And again, not something something I'm familiar with here on this channel as I go through these investigations and recognize the presence of these organizations in these locations. Here's an elementary school. Nice little turret on top, or bell tower, sorry. Again, you're looking at those wide streets and all sorts of ornate brick buildings at an early time period. No shortage of churches. We've got a good handful of them in here, and looked all to be built of brick or stone. Grace Church, Grace Episcopal. This was a rare find. I did not find it initially in my search, but it did pop up when I was looking elsewhere for it. And this is the old Green Opera House. Now this, I looked online, it said it was built in 1879. It looks like they're saying 1880 here. Very early 1880, you've got 10,000 people living in Cedar Rapids. They say this was a large opera house. It certainly looks like it. This is an interior shot of it. So why on earth are you building an opera house like this for such a small city? I think it's probably just because they love opera in Cedar Rapids. When they're not milling the flour and starch, they're watching opera. And there it is in the modern day. And this is what they do to these structures. They square them off. They become dilapidated. The bottom gets altered. They put a garage door in here. Right. So if we look back to this one, they take them to the point where the public is almost begging for them to be torn down. But as you can see, 'twas not always the case, and the decoration has been removed. All par for the course. Nothing I haven't seen before. The Guarantee Bank, built in that late 1890s period, less than 20,000 people living there. Close look at the stonework here. Absolutely incredible, making no sense for the timeline or population we're given for this location. And the name sort of jumps around. Cedar Rapids Savings Bank, Guarantee Building. Gets a little bit confusing sometimes when you're doing this research. The McKinley High School having an interesting entry area. We're told it's built in 22. This is the one that really has the head scratching. The old high school, or the Washington High School. And as is often the case, these types of structures are only really available online in a postcard form. You can see I have the 1855 or 1875 because we're not sure. Now my census for Cedar Rapids doesn't even go back to 1855, the Wikipedia census. In 1875 there's less than 10,000 people living there. But apparently they had the means to build a castle for a high school and put a little cone on the corners and a bell tower, of course. And of course they'll tell us it was probably because German immigrants or Italian immigrants, and yeah, nothing but the same old story. Amazing looking high school, almost lost to time, only really available in a couple postcards online. The Hotel Montrose. We may have seen the side of that earlier, and the side of that did show some of that fence work down below, but we're told this one's built between 1903 and 1906. Hotel Roosevelt, 1927. I'll just keep going here, giving you a sense, packing all these dates into a single package, giving you a sense of how much work would have had to have been going on in a very short period of time. The Immaculate Conception Church, 1914. This one's a pretty looking church. Looking like that's probably metal of some sort, maybe some tiles up there. Looking very old though. Speaking of looking old, this is the Knutson building. Looking like it's ready for the wrecking ball. My guess, and the reason I kept this in there, my guess is there was something more going on in the upper reaches, likely a mansard style roof, and it has been removed. It was removed a long time ago. That's what I suspect. Again, looking very old. Just a couple shots of the brickwork in the upper reaches there. So very common, this decorative brickwork. The Carnegie Library, of course, Andrew Carnegie gifting all sorts of libraries and books to the unwashed masses, if you will, so we could learn to read the books they want us to read. Built in that Carnegie timeline, we're told. I don't really buy that. Then County Courthouse, just going to gloss by this one for now. I didn't really get deep into that one, but make you aware of its existence. The Majestic Theater, built in 1908, we're told. Interesting, not looking like a whole lot from the outside. I do have a shot from the inside, looking like a whole lot more when you get to look at the inside of those. So makes you wonder too when you see a lot of the plain-looking structures that have been gutted and turned into office spaces and what they may have once looked like. It's all interesting to ponder on. We can't really know for sure once they're gone, right? Alright, we have the Masonic Library, 1884. This thing's a beauty. Real pretty looking building. Of course, the Benevolent Brotherhood decided it was important to provide the people with more books, just like old Carnegie. Maybe they were connected somehow. Maybe he was connected with them. Yeah. So you can see how this web starts to weave itself together as you do this research. All these similar names pop up, similar patterns of action, and that's part of the intent of making these videos from my angle, is to provide you with a different location, but to show you the similarities in the historical narrative, the inconsistencies in the historical narrative, and hopefully it helps to paint a picture of what we're seeing. There's an annex building next to the library as well. The interior of the library, just to give you a sense of the 1880s flair of Cedar Rapids, even though there's only 10,000 people living there then. And of course you have to have a temple as well. You can see it along the top there. Apparently maybe not originally built as a temple, or it was built as a temple. I say that because I also have the Order of Railway Conductors office building. It sounds kind of like a business, but I think it's actually a fraternal order we're looking at here. The Order of Railway Conductors of America. And I just have a quick snippet we can take a look at. In 1899, the Union was looking for a place to build its headquarters. let's see, in same time, 1897, Masonic Temple was being built at the corner of First Ave. When they ran out of money, the head of the Conductors Union helped raise money to finish the building. So this one's being built in 1897. And then it gets jumps around a bit as far as who's in there. Order of Railway Conductors, Masons, all seem to kind of be in bed with each other. So there's a timeline on its construction, 1897. Less than 25,000 people living there, probably around 20,000 people living there. They built that massive structure. This is the building I mentioned earlier that was used as the city hall. I think it was up until the mid-2008, somewhere in there. And then it flooded. There was a flood in Cedar Rapids, and then they moved the location. Kind of reminding me of some of the buildings I've seen in St. Louis with the upper columns, now that I think about it. But we'll keep moving forward. We have a Mercy Hospital. Just to keep that list complete. We already saw this hotel, so I'll skip past that one. There's a shot of the interior of the Montrose, though, just to give you a sense of that 3-year timeline build at a time when there was less than 30,000 people living in Cedar Rapids. They were doing this type of interior finish. So this one's the Meskwaki building. I couldn't get any writing on this. The photograph wouldn't let me, but I have a few looks at it. You can see the type of architecture is ticking those boxes. There's the high school in the background there that we saw. You can also see the brick paved streets ticking those boxes. So very heavy ornate stone and brickwork going on here. It still stands, although looking like it's getting close to being ready for the wrecking ball or renovation. I think maybe it was recently renovated, actually. There's that massive stonework at the bottom. Heavy construction here for good old Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We move on to the Capitol Theater, or Paramount Theater. We're told built in 1929. I have a bit of a contradiction going on here. Now they'll tell us that this was only a architectural rendition that never got built, but I often wonder if that's the case or if we've seen some modification of what was once there. And a couple interior shots of this beauty, the Paramount Theater now in the modern day, just to give you a sense of the style, Cedar Rapids style. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. In the late 20s, about 50,000 people living there. So it's still not really a good-sized city. Not until we get into the 60s or 70s do we get into the 6-digit mark for population. And they have the luxury of these amazing theaters. So to me, something's wrong with that timeline. It just doesn't make sense to me. All right, we come to one of my favorites in the file. This is the post office, and obviously not the one we've already looked at. This is the one I could find no information on when it was built. Every time I put the search in, it would show me this post office. I suspect there's a reason for that. This one is... You can see this photograph from 1900, and I don't think this is a new structure at that time. You can see the lower wells, heavy stonework. That makes sense for a post office. Cedar Rapids, 1900, there's 25,000 people living there. It looks like they've had this around, for a long time at that point. All right. I wanted to jump quickly back to that library just because I have an interior postcard look of that, just to give you a sense again of the interior finish detail going on in Cedar Rapids, blowing those timeline narratives apart, really, I think. So, 'cause some massive mills in Cedar Rapids. Here we have the Quaker Oats. I think there was an amalgamation that went on for that to happen. Did a little bit of research on it. Massive complexes here. Another one, Quaker Oats. You can see the mansard roof here, and then how plain this looks. So, modification maybe going on. Old world structures being modified. I think so. Being repurposed. That's my guess. Oh, there's that school again. And there's the Masonic Library again. I wanted to show this because it's also got a museum adjacent to it here. So throw that one in as well. Another hospital, this time St. Luke's Hospital, but you can see the construction style again. So trying to build these files up just to give you a sense of how many of these structures there were at the time. Again, to help you question the given narrative. Alright, St. Patrick's Church. St. Patrick's Church underwater. There's a good look at that bulgy stonework on that structure, which is a beauty. Here's the starch works. So yet another massive complex, industrial complex. And I mentioned earlier that wasn't the only fire, the first fire we looked at. We also have a massive fire in the starch works. This looks like it's happened in 1919. Explosion and fire. These places exploded, and I don't doubt it. You're dealing with very, very fine powders. If you've ever tried to light flour on fire or starch, you'll know how easily explosive that stuff is. Yeah, we have 2 locations going up in flames in that early time period. So certainly worth highlighting as we're looking at the this location. Another theater in Cedar Rapids. Give you a sense of the exterior. Beautiful. Coming to the end of the file here. And we have a couple churches. The Trinity Methodist Church. The Union Station, built in 1897. Again, that same timeline. We saw several buildings going up in that timeline. Also, a large problem I have with the narrative is the fact that there's so much going on in a singular amount of time in such a small location. It becomes implausible to accept the given historical narrative once you look at it a little bit closer. Just a sneak peek at the construction, the brickwork. Of course, no problem to do back then. This is the Ward Hall at Mountain Mercy College. Couldn't get a date on that. This is the other waterworks. Remember I mentioned earlier in the video. So we have 2 waterworks going on here. Not a lot of info there either. A nice looking church, this one. Laughable story. Westminster Presbyterian. They broke the ground on April 30th, 1904, and the first services were held on May 21st, 1905. So from groundbreaking to being ready to hold a service, we're looking at 13 months. Yeah, hogwash. I just don't see it. Here is the level of construction. And maybe, I don't know, what do you think? You buy that story? Feels like too short a timeline for me. Another high school, not a great photo drawing, not sure what it is, but you have some decoration there, so I thought I'd throw it in. This would be the consistory. We did see it in a postcard form earlier next to the shrine temple, and this is its use in the modern day, just in case you didn't think there was enough gentlemen's clubs in Cedar Rapids. And as I often like to do, I did dig up an old YMCA for you. This is the old one, but it's got some interesting brickwork going on, and if it's an old worlder, likely it's been tamed, and maybe there was more to it. I don't know. I just like to finish on these YMCAs. It is interesting. You have a lower entry here and the upper entry here, and this is a modern YMCA in Cedar Rapids. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for joining me, and look out for my next video next Friday. Thanks for watching. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.